Who would believe it? Me, Angel. This Chevron self-serve is so quick and easy, it's a dream. And clean. Ooh. Goodness knows. Miss Immaculate knows clean. Chevron self-serves are heavenly.
Chevron. Your town pump.
Webster is next on BCTV.
Good morning. Nothing irritates the normal Canadian, whether he's on U.I.C. or whether he's not, more than U.I.C. rip-offs. And I have a little story to tell you this morning, which I think is dreadful. Now, I may be wrong. I'm not always right. But there's a man called Bill Pittman who's got Hungry Herbie's in Cache Creek. I've stopped there for a hamburger more than once. And in the early part of the summer, Hungry Herbie's couldn't find any waitresses locally, you know, in Cache Creek. So Bill Pittman phones the Ashcroft office of Canada Employment and Immigration Commission. Used to be called Manpower, sensibly. Now it's got this funny name. And he said, "Hey, I want a waitress." And they said, "We haven't got a waitress, but we'll put it on the computer." So they put it on the computer from Ashcroft. Next thing he knows, he gets a phone call from a woman in Corner Brook, Newfoundland. "Hey, I'm going to be relocated to Cache Creek. Can I have the job?" "Sure," says Bill Pittman. Says she, "What does it pay?" $4, $4.50 an hour, accommodation $1 a night, plus all the tips you can get. So out she comes. She arrives, and she gets the job. And she's not a bad waitress at all. She starts on June the 24th. She finishes the job, having come all the way from Corner Brook, Newfoundland, on August the 5th. Now, how did she manage to get there when she was in U.I.C.? Well, she got a mobility, a relocation grant. And Bill Pittman's information was that it totaled about $1,500. Now, where did she go when she quit the job? Did she go to another job in Cache Creek? No. She turns up in Kimberley. For all I know, she went on U.I.C. in Kimberley. After the usual disqualification period, I suppose. Because if you're sent on a temporary relocation by C.E.I.C., you're there for a specific time and you come back again. We'll find out if they pay the fares back on temporary relocation. But not her. She goes from Kimberley to Banff. And at Banff, we made some inquiries, and the manager of the centre in Banff was really, first of all, the guy in Newfoundland whom we phoned wasn't exactly terribly cooperative about the thing, because civil servants aren't supposed to tell us very much indeed, if anything at all. He knew of the girl. She was a friend of his sister, Anton Koscielny was told. So we get back to Banff Springs, Banff, and we say, "What do you know about it?" And the manager of the Banff C.E.I.C. place said, "I wouldn't have let it happen in Banff." He says, "I figured I've saved the country $250,000 because Banff, as you know, is one of the ideal places to draw U.I.C. Great summer weather and hell of a good skiing in the winter. It's just like Whistler used to be when I raised the subject indelicately a few years ago with Prime Minister Trudeau." And the man in Banff knows perfectly well that people from all over the country, Newfoundland, Montreal, Ontario, they want to come to Banff by the hundreds, and if they can come on a relocation grant and work for a little while, well and good. In fact, between 700 and 1,000 people tried to relocate in Banff in these summer months. Wintertime, not quite such a big demand, $500 to $800. But of course, It would seem that the employment and immigration people use this as a means of getting people off their back. And I have no objection whatsoever to people being sent across the country to jobs that can't be filled locally. But when you're looking for a waitress at between $4 and $4.50 an hour, that's something else again. So there's the basic story. Bill Pittman needs a waitress. Bill asks Ashcroft. Ashcroft puts it on the computer. Somebody picks up the message in Connellbrook and says, hey, we got a waitress. Do you want to go? Yeah, sure I want to go. Get the money to relocate, keep the job for 5 weeks. And if no other job is available, I presume the woman who had been in unemployment insurance before, we think, would go back on unemployment insurance again in the much nicer climate and healthier place to live in, which is, of course, Kimberley or Banff, then in Connellbrook, Newfoundland. Now, on the telephone, I've got Hungry Herbie. Are you there, Bill?
Good morning.
Bill, how did you find out when... First of all, did I tell the story reasonably accurately?
I think you did, yes.
Okay. How did you find out... This is Bill Pittman of Hungry Herbie's. How did you find out... Or did you know when she was coming that she was getting the mileage allowance, which came, you'd think, to about $1,500 to come out here?
Yes, I did know.
How did you know?
Well, she told me on the phone.
That they were going to pay her way out?
The girl phoned me from Newfoundland, Pasadena, Newfoundland. I want a job. Well, I said, sure, come on out, but it's going to cost you quite a bit to fly out here. Do you need some money? And I was going to send her some money, see, for airfare. And, oh, no, she said, Manpower is going to pay for this all, you know.
Tell me, why in the name of goodness couldn't you get a waitress from Kamloops or Cache Creek or...
Mr. Webster, I just hired a lady here a few days ago who was on unemployment insurance all summer in Kamloops. All summer. Well, I said, where the hell were you in July and August? Why didn't you come and work for me then? Oh, I didn't think of checking the Cache Creek area for a job.
Well, of course, if she was living in Kamloops, she didn't have to move to Cache Creek. Nobody would force her to do that.
No, but you know what? If this thing was on their national broadcast computer, but supposedly in every office there's a waitress job in Cache Creek, why would they fly one from Newfoundland when they could draw one from Kamloops?
Anyway, how did you like your tax money being spent? You accepted the fact that your tax money was being spent to send a waitress out for, what, $4.50 an hour tops?
Yeah.
You accepted that quite willingly and freely.
Well, as I say, I was quite prepared to send her the cash for the airfare out myself, you know. I needed the help. I wasn't really too worried about the...
After she left you, do you happen to know if she went on U.I.C. in Kimberley?
I wouldn't doubt it, but I can't be sure.
You don't know that? Somebody here shaking their head. We'll hear about that later.
No, I don't know that for sure.
Anyway, next year, will you please try and find waitresses in your area and get the Ashcroft and Kamloops people to search the records properly?
You know, I phoned long distance to 4 or 5 student placement centers in Vancouver, and I had one call, one reply.
This summer?
This summer. Now, our provincial government is putting up millions of dollars for youth employment programs. Millions of dollars.
Is your place a dreadful place to work?
Well, it's pretty busy, but I treat them people up there like princesses.
What's the accommodation like at $1 a night?
Well, it's a 2-bedroom apartment that houses 3. It's wall-to-wall carpeting, a private bathroom, private entrance, cooking facilities.
Did she tell you why she quit after 5 weeks?
Well, yeah, she wanted to go live with her boyfriend in Kimberley. You know, she got her check. 2 days later, she got a car, and a week later, she was gone.
What do you mean she got a car?
She bought a little car, you know. Compliments of the people of Canada.
Well, you're being cynical. Maybe her boyfriend bought the car.
Well, no, two.
Okay, I'll make a deal with you, Hungry Herbie, yeah. Bill Pittman. If you get stuck for a waitress in Cache Creek next year, give me a shout, and I'll find one for you.
You're on.
Okay, Bill.
All right, goodbye.
Bye. In the studio this morning, to correct me, demolish me, explain to me, or whatever, is Murray Perry of Canada Manpower, of Canada Employment and Immigration Commission. Murray, yes, we'll have at it after the break. Murray Perry from the Canada Employment and Immigration Centre. Was I unfair in that report?
You were quite accurate.
But was I unfair?
Well, I would think that you were a little biased because nobody in the past 10 minutes has mentioned all the thousands of people who were helped legitimately and contributed God knows how much to the economy of the country by going to places that they otherwise couldn't get to.
I understand that Alberta is full of people from Newfoundland, probably on relocation grants, who are badly needed for the labor in the tar sands.
Well, because of the organization of our organization, the originating province, region, it's entirely a matter of them. It had nothing to do with us, or none of our money was involved in British Columbia to bring the girl from Corner Brook. It was a decision by a councillor in Corner Brook.
Well, but put it my way. Is it sane, sensible, or even halfway sane or sensible when you need a waitress at $4.50 an hour in Kamloops, in Cache Creek, that we, the taxpayers, fly her from Newfoundland, give her a mobility grant, and you can probably tell me the amount, and she's not even committed to stay to the job for more than 5 minutes? Well, how does the system, first of all,
Well, she's committed to take the job.
for 5 minutes.
Well, the law doesn't specify that. We expect people to be honorable and do the right thing, of course. You can't operate without that assumption.
Do you think that this was a good use of the mobility relocation grant system for the benefit of the nation?
Quite frankly, on the face of it, I would say no.
No.
Except that, and I talked to our program specialist about this yesterday, and he points out that you can't really make that value judgment unless you happen to be in Corner Brook at that particular time. Now, that girl had been on unemployment insurance or welfare or something for a long, long time because of the labor market conditions in Corner Brook.
What you didn't know was that her boyfriend was in Kimberley, and this
Well,
is
we
a good
didn't
way to
care,
get
frankly,
BC.
about that. As I say, we have to take people at face value. Now, she'd been collecting money from the public purse without making any contribution to the labor force because she was denied opportunity to work. So, with the expenditure of actually $1,808.60, she became, instead of a taker, she became a contributor.
For 5 weeks.
Well,
How do I know she's not back on unemployment insurance again?
well, I do. She's not. I checked that yesterday, too.
Did she get a job in Kimberley?
I can't answer that.
Did she get a job in Banff?
I can't answer that either because, you know, this
Does she
country depends on free movement, doesn't it?
Well, that's part of the constitutional crisis and all the rest of it, but the free movement isn't normally regarded as an $1,808.60 subsidy to fill a vacancy which surely, Mr. Perry, could have been filled from within the unemployed in British Columbia.
If you talk to our people in the Cache Creek area, in fact, that office in Ashcroft has now moved to Cache Creek because that's where the activity is. Cache Creek has been continually a problem for staffing. As Hungry Herbie pointed out, if you're paying minimum wage or entry wage salary levels, that pretty well cuts out people who have their own transportation, doesn't it? They have to live in Cache Creek.
Correct.
Now, anybody who's been to Cache Creek knows it's a fine place to visit, but would you want to live there if you were a kid?
I buy gas and a hamburger many a time in Cache Creek on my way to and from Kamloops.
Right.
But if I'm unemployed, and even if I'm a student, and I'm offered accommodation in a 2-bedroom apartment with wall-to-wall carpeting at $1 a night, sharing it with 2 other girls, I think I might well take it.
Well, I think I probably would have too, but otherwise, other people in British Columbia who were certainly exposed to that job for several weeks before it was filled. And everybody in Vancouver was given the opportunity. All they had to do was ask or look on the job order board because it was in the National Job Bank for a long time. They obviously felt otherwise.
Here we are in a country which has got 800,000 unemployed, even though the rate is low in British Columbia. And to fill a waitress's job at Hungry Herbie's on June the 24th, we've got to, it sounds like a song, fly somebody in from Newfoundland at a cost of $1,808.60 to the taxpayer.
Well, there's another 600 people in British Columbia that we haven't heard about yet.
Tell me about them. I'm agog.
Well, some of them, for example, are fulfilling highly specialized jobs in mining and forestry that otherwise would go unfilled, that would result in the loss of production of whatnot because we bring them from Elliott Lake to Faro, Yukon Territory.
100% approval.
All right. Actually, it's not 100% approval. I think one application is accepted for every 2 or 3 that's received.
But look at the guy in Banff. I want to know how the system works.
Well, Banff isn't Cache Creek.
No, but I'm just saying, look at the attitude of the guy in Banff. The attitude of the guy in Banff is that if people want jobs in Banff,
Yeah.
lots of tips, lots of social life, he will not use the mobility relocation program.
Because he doesn't have to.
Because they'll get there by train, bus, or they'll hitchhike.
That's right.
But if it's Cache Creek, we've got to send them from Newfoundland.
What would you think about a girl, let's say, hypothetically, who lives in Princeton?
Princeton, right.
And she has, at great expense and trouble, learned to become a legal stenographer, which is a pretty highly valuable trade in this day and age. It's always in short supply. But she realizes there is no scope for legal stenography in Princeton. So she goes to our office and says, I haven't got any money. I've spent it all getting an education, but I need a job. I'd like to go to Vancouver and look for a job because I think, et cetera, et cetera. And so we'd give her the money. Now, don't you think that's good use of the money?
No.
What should she do? Stay in Princeton?
No, she's smart enough to have done it. She's smart enough to have the initiative. And I think there's still a spirit of self-reliance, surely among well-educated young Canadians who, on the face of it, if they want a job as a legal steno in Vancouver, they could write to any one of a dozen big law firms and get one, and they'd say, oh, we'll give you $100 advance. Surely you can
it's wonderful saying all these things because you've been doing things like that all your life, but the girl in Princeton maybe doesn't know how to do things like that.
Well, somebody should tell her.
All right, but that's not my business.
Webster and Murray Perry after the break. In case you came in late, I'm telling the story of a gal who was paid $1,808.60 in June of this year to fly, plus relocation expenses, from Pasadena near Corner Brook, Newfoundland, to take a job in Hungry Herbie's as a waitress in Cache Creek at, we'll say, $4.50 an hour. She lasted 5 weeks and moved on to other things. I had taken the usual cynical presumption that she'd been on U.I.C. or welfare before she came here, that she'd come back on U.I.C. again, but I'm reliably assured, while you won't give me confidential details, that such is not the case.
She's not receiving any unemployment insurance benefits.
She may be receiving welfare.
I don't know.
You'll give me one half of the answer. At least she's not.
Well, welfare has nothing to do with the federal government.
I'm well aware of that, but I'm just saying, you say U.I.C. and suddenly the little things click, and I think, well, maybe she's qualified for welfare.
Well, when she left the job, she, of course, came back to our office, and at the time she said she was going to look for a better paying job.
Would she be required to pay back any of the relocation amount at all?
Well, the case is still being studied. I would doubt it in this case. I don't know. Some people have been asked to return funds.
Yeah, you can only ask them, though, because you give them the money and it's down the tube then.
Well, if they don't satisfy the letter of the law, there are things that can be done.
In other words, the U.I.C. can be threatened and they'll have to go on welfare.
Not necessarily.
Now, I'm prepared to concede right away that the proper use of relocation for skilled people from place to place across the country is a good thing.
Thank you.
Agreed?
Yes, good, good.
All right, how did she get $1,808.60 when, after all, the fare from Newfoundland to Vancouver, at a very rough estimate, one-way economy fare would be about $400? On a seat sale, it would be less, but no more than $400.
Well, the relocation assistance also includes the movement of her goods and effects and things.
Or furniture.
Well, if she had some furniture, or she might have, 8, 10 suitcases full of things, perhaps a steamer trunk, that would be shipped.
Yeah. How does it work out, though? I mean, how do you get $1,808.60?
Well, I don't have the file here with me.
Well,
I would tell you if I did, but the fact is that that's the total amount of monies that were paid.
Well, no, it's $400 for plane fare. A night changing planes in Toronto, that'd be $60. Or I don't know what the federal rate is.
Probably, I think we pay maximum $41.
And moving our furniture might be $500 because she didn't have any dependents with her. Don't believe she has any dependents. So we're coming to $1,000.
She's got to get from Corner Brook to St. John to get an airplane too, remember?
And then from St. John to Toronto.
Yeah, or Montreal probably.
Montreal to Vancouver, and Vancouver to Kamloops, and Kamloops to Cache Creek.
$1,800 doesn't go very far these days when you're buying transportation like that. It's 4,000 miles away.
Is it so much a mile?
Well, it's not so much a mile so much as the fact that it's based on the mileage to be traveled.
Anyway, if I move from here to Kamloops, will you give me just bus fare?
And probably a night's lodging, or however.
I'm not talking about the married man with 3 kids who is a heavy-duty mechanic and has no resources of his own. But does nobody move from town to town on their own money anymore?
Oh, yeah, the great majority of people do.
Can you give me any figures of how much we spend on relocation grants? I mean, you say 600 other people in British Columbia brought here on skilled or reasonably skilled jobs.
Primarily in the forestry and mining business.
Well, that's understandable.
Yeah, remote locations.
Any total idea of what the federal budget is for this kind of thing, or is it just...
Yeah, no, the program was begun in 1967, I think it was, or 68. And at the time, it was funded across the country at $2.5 million. Mm-hmm. And it's since gone down. It's been reduced each year. This year in British Columbia, we will be spending about $700,000. That's about it, yeah.
You mean British Columbia will spend, your region will spend $700,000?
We'll commit about that much, yeah.
Is that to relocate people within the province?
And in other provinces, too.
No,
if we
okay.
originate the things.
If I'm in Cornerbrook, Newfoundland,
Yeah.
and I have a bunch of unemployed that I want to get off my rolls, and I've got my Newfoundland budget, I can send anybody who will be accepted anywhere else in the country, whether or not they're a dishwasher or a cook, to the Yucca, right? Where they might need them, to Cache Creek.
Yep.
Hmm?
Well,
Or can the guy in Ashcroft, as the guy in Banff says, say, hey, that's bloody, excuse me, that's very stupid. I'm not going to see you spend $1,808.60 to fly somebody for a waitress. We'll make another effort here.
well, I can tell you that that's the way it probably would have happened in British Columbia.
That's what the guy in Banff, Alberta, says. Look, I'm not going to use this thing. He reckons he saved $250,000 by accepting people for jobs who came in to see the office.
Yeah, but the difference between Cache Creek and Banff for a young person is enormous. You know, the man in Banff hasn't got any problem at all. He can afford to say things like that. But you talk to Hungry Herbie again, and I think he'll be pleased about that mobility program.
Well, no, I'll find him a waitress in Kamloops.
Well, good luck to you.
Eh? You think it's impossible?
No, but the councillors who do it for a living think it's very, very difficult.
But the councillors who do it a living, with all due respect, know the funds are there. They know the facilities there. It's safe saying to somebody, can you afford to go? Well, no, I can't afford to go. I'm just 18 and I'm living at home with my mother and father, and they only make $100,000 a year. You'll have to give me a relocation allowance. The point is, that the program is there. You can't blame the civil servants for using it.
No, but the thing is, in British Columbia, the policy is that we ask that the client have some kind of financial stake in that move. Well, not 100% government funds, but he's got to have some kind of stake in the thing.
Which client? You mean Hungry Herbie?
No, I'm talking about, well, the hypothetical unemployed person who is going to be relocated. You know, we would ask, as a matter of policy, that they have some kind of stake in it, because we find that the program is much more successful that way. The person stays in the job.
What stake did this waitress have in it?
I don't know. You'd have to ask the people in Newfoundland.
They won't tell us. All we know is that he was a friend of his sister's.
Well,
the girl was a friend of his sister's.
All I know is what's on the file, and that isn't on the file.
You will excuse me nagging you on this.
Well, that's okay. I'm used to it, Jack, over the years.
But this is a proper nag, is it not? I mean,
Yeah.
surely when Axworthy's here, and I say to Axworthy, as I will do, is the Relocation Mobility Grant Program for the purpose of moving unemployed waitresses in Newfoundland to Cache Creek? He might surprise me by saying yes.
Well, he's the minister. Let me put it this way, Jack. Suppose there's a young lad in a miserable life in the Gorbals, and he wants to get out of Glasgow in the
Oh,
worst
he can't get in. You won't let people in from
If the
Scotland.
British Labour Exchange had this program, that chap could have gone to Britain and not grown up with that dreadful accent.
He could have gone to England and done very well against the lower IQs south of the border. That is, you got me on camera? That is a joke. Please don't write me nasty letters about that somewhat racist remark. It's a standing joke. Okay, Murray, thank you for being forthright, and thank you for agreeing that this was probably a misuse of the program. You do agree?
It probably was, but the jury's still out. We don't know all the facts.
Well, what do you mean the jury? What jury?
Well, you would have to be party to the interview in Cornerbrook between that girl and the counselor to have understood fully what happened.
When the jury brings in its verdict, could you see if you can get me an extract of the report?
Yes, I will.
Can you get it for me?
Well, I'll give you the gist of whatever happens, because we are making inquiries of Newfoundland about the very thing. And if we don't, the auditors will.
Now, my grateful thanks to Murray Perry. I want to tell you a little personal thing. When I started in the Sun in 1947, you started that year too?
That's right.
What were you doing?
I was abducted as a child. I was a copy boy there.
I was around there, assistant city editor.
Well, you were the police reporter then. I remember Pierre Burton started that same week, Ray Timpson.
Pierre Burton left that same week. Ray Timpson, Charlie McFarlane, a bunch of orangutans,
Yes.
including myself.
Yes.
See,
a long time ago.
In this business, you got to understand, you don't have many friends because you got to bring them in now and again and be nasty to them. My thanks to Murray Perry. Next, a man who can be nasty in his own right if he uses his powers, and his name is Karl Friedmann. He's a doctor, and he has one of the most unenviable jobs in British Columbia. He is the Ombudsman. After the break. On the face of it, the legal profession doesn't like him. On the face of it, I think he's building up a bureaucracy which I'm a little bit worried about. Dr. Karl Friedmann, British Columbia's Ombudsman, now in his second year of office. And we'll find out from him how much his wings have not been allowed to unfold and who is attempting to clip his wings as a man who answers to the legislature of British Columbia under a special statute which gives him a 6-year tenure at $54,000 a year. Am I right in my basic facts, Dr. Friedmann?
57.
$57,000 a year.
Right.
Now,
Otherwise, you're right.
how far do your powers spread over the provincial organizations in British Columbia?
First of all, every government ministry is covered. Secondly, every agency that is somehow appointed by a provincial statute, the provincial cabinet, or under any provincial, a majority of the members are appointed by the provincial government, essentially. All those agencies I can investigate if there is a complaint about them, or of course on my own motion.
A complaint about them in what way? A complaint about their method of operation, or a complaint about an injustice to an individual employed with or dealing with that corporation?
Both. All that has to be satisfied is that it's a matter of administration, and you're entitled to make a complaint.
I have a complaint about the present takeover bid by the Brick Corporation, whose directors were which was formed by the provincial government and whose directors were virtually appointed by the provincial government, in fact were appointed. Will you investigate my complaint?
No. There is a provision in what is called the Schedule of the Ombudsman Act, and there are 11 things listed. The first two I've already mentioned, ministries of the government, and then any boards, bureaus, tribunals, etc., that are appointed by the government. And then it says number 3, corporations owned by the government. But I'm advised that technically BRIC is not owned by the government. And while I was able to investigate complaints about how the shares were distributed in the first place, and I had a number of complaints about that, now what BRIC does is outside my jurisdiction.
In other words, if I didn't get my 5 free shares, so-called, I could come to you and say, I've been done in the eye, I want my 5 free shares.
You have a complaint about the Ministry of Finance that was responsible for the distribution, and I can investigate that.
Is it not a fact, said Webster, that you are not getting full cooperation from all provincial ministries?
That's correct.
Which are the ones that are giving you difficulty?
I suppose I could say that the Attorney General's Department is making the most difficulties.
In what way?
I suppose them being mostly lawyers, you have to expect that they think they know everything best. And
Aren't you a lawyer?
No,
What were you again?
I was a political scientist.
Okay,
I did study some law.
right.
In
So
London.
the Attorney General's Department is full of lawyers who know everything best. In what way are they obstructing you?
I suppose one way that every department occasionally likes to do is delay. Okay, they say they can't find a file, they've lost a file and things like that. We have, for example, tried to get access to a file, the proceedings of a public inquiry. Well, first the ministry said, well, the provincial secretary has it, go and ask them. The provincial secretary tells me, no, it's with the Attorney General. We asked the Attorney General, and he says, all right, you can have access to it. That was a member of the public who wanted to have access to the proceedings of that, of a inquiry of the Judicial Council. And we get the assurance from the Attorney General himself that, yes, you may have access, and I hereby, of course, give authorization. And we get back to the ministry, and they say, we've lost it. We've lost it. We've lost the record.
Was that the recent judicial inquiry into the conduct of a provincial court judge?
Yes.
They have lost it.
Yes, that's what they said.
How far can you go to regain that? Can you go to the original stenotype records and have it redone?
I will try and find it for them.
Well, that's abominable.
I think it is.
This is the inquiry into the conduct of a provincial court judge, which hit the headlines.
It was a public inquiry.
Over into matters which happened on the streets and in the police station.
I suppose, yes.
We're talking about that, and I don't want to hound the judge again, but it was the judge of the lower court, not the one of the higher court, the judge of the lower court who was under official public scrutiny.
Yes, there was a citizen who wanted to make a study of various problems in the judiciary, and his problem was that he couldn't get access to what obviously should have been a public document. If you have a public inquiry, the record of the inquiry is no longer confidential or secret.
You have established that the inquiry was properly in the custody of Mr. Williams' department.
Right.
Not the provincial secretary, as you were first led to believe.
Correctly.
And have you now been told in writing that they have lost it?
Not in writing, over the phone.
May I make a request to you?
Sure.
When you find that, may I have access to that transcript too, just to refresh my memory?
Anybody can have access to it. It's a public document.
Would I have to buy the document from you, or would you just make it available in your office?
I believe that it should be made available by the authority that has custody of it. In this case, the Attorney General. You may have to pay for the copying.
So much a page.
Yes.
Interesting session with Karl, I was going to say Karl Ombudsman, the Friedman. Dr. Karl Friedman, the Ombudsman, after the break. Dr. Karl Friedman, the Ombudsman, has just made my hair stand on end by telling me that the public transcript, or the transcript of a public inquiry into the conduct of a provincial court judge has apparently been lost. Now, as I was saying to you, you can go back to the... do you have the authority, or must you chase Williams to reconstruct that from the original stenotypist's notes of the inquiry?
Well, obviously, I'm going to hold the Ministry of the Attorney General responsible for the whereabouts of that transcript.
It's unbelievable that that transcript of all transcripts should be missing.
Well, it's things get lost in a shuffle. I don't want to say that nothing ever gets lost. We have, unfortunately, also lost files, and I know what it means to go and chase them, you know.
Well, now, what about the courts? Can you always find that you can get access to court documents without any problem?
There's a bit of a difficulty here. As you are fully aware, what judges do can be subdivided into administrative acts and judicial acts. And when you have a complaint about the contents of a judgment, your right of appeal is to a superior court. And the Ombudsman is not intended to question the decisions of judges. However, if there is an administrative matter, it's usually in the Attorney General's department under the division of the court administration branch, you know, that we can indeed look into. There's one other matter that we can't look into, and that irritates people because they find, well, what are you there for? Is the decision of the Attorney General's ministry to prosecute, okay? A decision to prosecute. You may be familiar with the John Waters case in Scotland in 1958. No. The critical point was that the Attorney General, or in Scotland the Lord Advocate, is not answerable to Parliament for his decision to prosecute or not to prosecute. Okay? That's a very difficult constitutional point. If you make them answerable to Parliament, you politicize the prosecuting decision.
Right.
Therefore, it's difficult to make that. And there is in the Ombudsman Act a provision that, in my view, prevents me from questioning a prosecutor about an individual decision.
Oh, I would incline to go along with that decision because of this point you made that if you give the politicians the absolute right to go back over a decision to prosecute, you're politicizing the prosecution.
Precisely.
But one may have one's concerns about why someone is not prosecuted. But surely there's a remedy in court if someone is not prosecuted. An individual is free to take his own information to the Crown and ask for a mandamus or something to get it done.
Right, you can take it to a provincial court judge, I believe, and the technical term, I believe, is to lay an information. That means you start a private prosecution.
So to some extent, you're involved in freedom of information. If I come to you and I can't get hold of what I think is a public document, you will ascertain for me if that's a public document within your purview.
Definitely, yes.
Now, to be more critical, what kind of feather-bedded bureaucracy have you so far set up?
Well, I started out with a total of, including myself, 25 people, of whom 7 were in the secretarial positions. And I had 1 lawyer and 12, now 14 investigators, 1 administrative officer who doubles as an investigator also, and 1 administrative assistant who has to deal with information and so on and so forth.
425?
Yes.
Bit hefty already, isn't it?
I don't think so. It really depends on the volume of complaints that you get that come to you.
What's your budget? Have you an open-ended budget?
No. I have about 1 million for the current year. However, some changes have occurred because of the large volume of complaints I have received and because of my desire to process, and I don't like that word, but to deal with the complaints at the right speed. I have asked for an increase in staff, and the provincial government has granted that increase, and I am in the process of finishing hiring, so we will be 34.
What kind of people do you have? Ex-policemen on handsome pensions?
I had 1 person who in his past has been a policeman for the city of Vancouver for a few years, but he has also worked for an ombudsman office for 4 years. So
Mostly what kind of people do you have as investigators?
I don't think you can give a general category because, let me put it this way, about 1/3 now of my investigators have a background in law. And there is something in the ombudsman job that sort of makes them win competitions because they can analyze, they know the law, they know a lot of institutions.
It's a handicap, you know, because lawyers, as you and I might agree, brainwash themselves on the righteousness of their institutions, and they do not brook complaints. They know best.
I don't know if I would say that generally about all lawyers, but certainly not my lawyers.
I would say about the Attorney General's Department. I would, you don't have to. Now, types of, how many complaints have you had?
I expected, and I based that expectation on the flow of complaints to other provincial ombudsmen in Canada. I expected about 12 to 1,500 per year. I believe we're over 3,000 in 1 year already.
About, can you categorize them for me? How many of them are poor souls who have been, and I say this quite bluntly because they used to come to see me in their hundreds, driven round the bend by intolerable situations, medical or legal business, and they're not always right. It may have been a proper operation which didn't work out right, or they may have lost a trial, pursued it endlessly, and nobody ever told them to stop. How many of them are beyond help?
I would say about 10 or 20%, mostly because their problem is outside what the provincial ombudsman can do. The provincial ombudsman can look at actions of the provincial government and the provincial government departments, ministries.
Including firings?
Sorry?
Including firings of provincial employees?
Well, yes and no, okay? Yes, because principally I can investigate it. No, because I'm asking all those, first of all, to use their union, because there is a grievance procedure. And secondly, if it is a claim of wrongful dismissal, I'm saying this is an appropriate subject for the courts, not for the ombudsman.
In other words, you're saying to them, first of all, you must go through your union constitutional procedures or nobody can help you in the first place.
Right.
Secondly, if it's wrongful dismissal, you can tell them whether or not they have a right of action at law.
Yes.
More with Karl Friedmann, the Ombudsman, after the break. I think the important thing for me to establish this morning for the benefit of people who flock to your office as a result of this program is your area. Every provincial ministry. What kind of complaint? I mean, what's the classic? No, I don't mean what do you get. But you can investigate any provincial ministry on any matter.
On any matter of administration.
On fair hearing.
Fair hearing, procedures, practices, regulations, actual conduct of an individual, decisions they make, recommendations they make.
Discrimination?
Yes, I have a provision in the statute that says I may criticize an administrative action or an administrative procedure that is improperly discriminatory. And
I mean, but refusing to hire someone who is either Scotch or East Indian or Chinese?
well, there is a bit of an overlap with the Human Rights Branch. Primarily that is their job, but if, for example, the charge of discrimination on grounds of age or
Right.
sex or race comes to me, and it is about the provincial government, an agency of the government, either I or the Human Rights Branch can investigate it, and we have solved this practically.
All right. I have a compensation board claim. I happen to belong to one of the few unions that doesn't properly represent the workers. Will you take up my claim for me?
Whether or not you belong to a union, it doesn't matter. I can take up your complaint.
Not my claim.
No, not your claim. There is a slight distinction here. Again, the law under which I operate says that a person who has an appeal to a tribunal, in this instance the boards of review with the Workers' Compensation Board, must use that appeal first before I can investigate it.
But will you look at an appeal and decide whether or not it should be pursued as a wrong decision?
Very definitely, yes.
ICBC. I was charged unfairly $300 under the FAIR program next year for an accident which was not my fault.
We look at that.
You can't really act on that.
We do all the time. We have many complaints about ICBC.
And you look into them.
We look into them, definitely, yes.
I can send all the ICBC complaints to you.
I wish you hadn't mentioned it, but yes, I have a duty to look at them. I am also asking people
You
to...
can finish up with a staff of 5,000 if you're going to look at every administrative decision of Crown corporations.
I don't plan to have that many.
Your art is going to have to be weeding out the bad ones, the pointless ones.
Very definitely. We have to look at, first of all, whether people can do something else on their own. And we sometimes, in fact, very often, we have to send them back. Please go and check this with Murray Rogan, who is the complaints person for ICBC.
Murray Rogan. Murray Rogan. R-O-G-A-N?
Yes.
Murray Rogan complaints about ICBC. Let me know if you get brushed off, but that's the man to complain to. Murray Rogan. What happened to that American? Oh, yes, he's back in town trying to sell insurance. Human resource allowances.
Yes, we get lots of complaints there. Again, there is a bit of, I wouldn't say a problem, but the present regulations allow a person who has been denied a benefit or has been cut off a benefit to make an appeal to an appeal tribunal, okay? So we say to them, have you considered, are you aware of the fact that there is an appeal tribunal? Have you considered going to it? And please go. We do look at, I may add.
Okay, somebody in a mental hospital whose right of review after 30 days has not been given. Have you looked into any people allegedly improperly held in mental hospitals?
Yes.
With any success, or do you find the establishment works well?
I don't think I could make that sort of general judgment right now. We have had relatively few complaints of that nature. But again, there is a review procedure inside the agency. The problem is that most people don't know about those appeal avenues that are already in place.
Well, especially if they're inside a mental hospital.
That is always
or
a
if the
problem.
relatives are kind of confused about what's happening.
Yes.
Medical treatment. I was to get my left toe cut off, and instead they cut off my right toe.
Well, I think you have two recourses. One is to go to court for a malpractice suit. You get yourself a lawyer. The other is you go and make a complaint to the College of Physicians and
Do
Surgeons.
you have any powers to investigate the medical profession?
No, not at this stage.
Do you have any powers? Do you want the powers to investigate the medical profession?
Let me put it this way. I will in the future have the right to investigate what the College of Physicians and Surgeons does with your complaint, okay? But that is part of the Ombudsman schedule that has not yet been proclaimed. In other words, it's not yet law.
What makes you think it's going to be proclaimed?
It's written right into the Ombudsman statute, and I imagine the public will demand of the government that they act sooner or later on it.
You're not politically naive as a political scientist, are you?
No, I don't think so.
In other words, you hope to have the power that if I complain to the College of Physicians and Surgeons to look at their way of handling my complaint and saying, supposing they handle it wrongly, hypothetically, can you say do it again?
Not now.
In future?
In the future, when the government comes around to proclaiming that part of the Ombudsman schedule, you see, which extends my authority to all these other authorities.
Why don't you like the legal profession?
I've never said I don't like them.
You were quoted at Harrison Hot Springs, and the legal profession, the Law Society, got up on its high horse and accused you of not knowing what you were talking about.
Well, that was one person who did that. That person never was at the meeting, and...
What did you say?
I said I receive a lot of complaints about lawyers. I haven't had time or resources to analyze why people complain about lawyers, but there are a number of things that are very obvious. You know, lawyers don't communicate with their clients, they don't explain their fee system, they don't talk a common language that people can understand, they therefore confuse, create wrong expectations, and so on.
Some lawyers.
Yes, and then I said the public doesn't seem to trust the present review procedure that the Law Society has about any complaints of their own members, okay? And I said, well, one thing you can do, for example, to increase the confidence of the public is to add non-lawyers to your disciplinary panels, you know. I said, that's just one suggestion. Another suggestion, Quebec, for example, now controls all their professions. There is a provincial licensing board to which all the professional organizations have to be accredited.
Are you telling me that you approve of the fact that the Law Society should not have the right to admit members, but that there should be a provincial licensing board which sets standards?
I'm not taking a stand on whether it should be so. I'm just saying that if the complaints of the public increase, the public is likely to demand a greater form of government control over the professions. You see, this is the risk that the professions take when they don't attend to the complaints properly.
Well, I mean, it's really quite unthinkable that the legal profession has private statutes under which they can control discipline and disbar, and the carpenters don't. What's the difference in today's democracy?
Well, personally, I don't think there's much of a difference. It's a fancy name. You call it association or society. In practice, it amounts to...
You don't have the powers yet for the lawyers?
No.
Nor the doctors?
No.
Nor, and they need it, the dentists?
No.
You hope to have it?
It's up to the government.
But you recommend that they proclaim these sections of the Act?
Let me put it this way. When I applied for this position, I was fascinated by this new aspect of ombudsmanship. In other provinces, it's not yet there. In British Columbia, it was written into the Ombudsman Act. And I thought that was a very interesting development, a new development, while British Columbia was the last province to have an ombudsman, but it had a statute, a program that was interesting.
Going to take some telephone calls to you, but first I'd like you, after the next break, to give me perhaps some samples of the effective action with ministries, administratively, that you've been able to take up to now. Karl Friedmann, the Ombudsman, after the break. Dr. Karl Friedmann, the Ombudsman, give me the classic kind of case where somebody can come to you with a complaint and without too much foo-for-all. What's your average time for settling valid complaints?
I suppose there's a mathematical average.
Roughly. Couple of days, couple of weeks?
Couple of months, at least.
Couple of months. Okay, give me the kind of complaint that you've been able to straighten up.
We discover in many departments existing appeal mechanisms. In other words, if you get turned down on a permit application or a benefit or Crown land acquisition, there is an appeal to somebody that can adjudicate it. They are called quasi-judicial tribunals. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, agencies like Workers' Compensation Board don't advise the complainants of their right of appeal.
They don't?
In their decision letter. They hand out a general brochure in which there's something about the appeal level.
In other words, they say, we've rejected your application for this, that, and the next thing. Thank you, goodbye, and God bless you. Here is a brochure.
Very often this is the case, and I have said that this is not good enough. I said that in each decision letter, people should be advised about their right of appeal, and it should be made in reasonably plain language. They should inform them of any deadlines they have to meet, and please do it from now on.
On the other side of the coin, of course, you could well be creating a monstrosity, because not all decisions are wrong. And it's like going to appeal on a court case on a contingency basis with a lawyer or whatever. You might go on appealing forever and just drive yourself around the bend when you have properly lost the case.
Yes, but the decision on whether you appeal is yours as the complainant, you see. And I shouldn't be making, I as an administrator shouldn't be making that decision for you by withholding information about the appeal avenue.
As you can see, you're turned down, but you have an appeal to the Committee of the Cabinet, or you have an appeal to a medical review board. Or
Now, the reaction of the civil servant is, we don't tell them about the appeal because otherwise they will appeal. And I said, well, the legislature or the regulations provided that appeal. It's not up to you.
Have the civil servants in these departments changed their attitudes since?
I don't think attitudes change that fast. You know, I make a recommendation, please advise them. I'll check back with every subsequent case. Has it been implemented? Of course, there are always some people who have never heard about it.
Have you any administrative or executive powers under your own act to tell people to do things?
I have powers to ask for information, access to files, persons. I can take evidence under oath. But when I'm finished, I form a judgment on whether the complaint is justified or substantiated, as we say, and then I have the right to make a recommendation, okay? And it's only a recommendation. I cannot tell them, do this, do that.
Your power is in the power of the publicity, of the detail, or the language strength thereof of your annual report to the legislature.
More than annual report, I may make a report. If an agency refuses to accept my recommendation, I may make a report to the Cabinet, to the legislature in a special report. I may make the case public. And, you know...
Have you done that yet?
The last one, making a case public, not yet. I think I would say it's usually a last resort if I do not get cooperation.
If I come to you with a complaint, and the complaint is a specific complaint, but whatever, does your investigating officer take the evidence from me on oath?
As a complainant? Not usually, no.
If you're doing an investigation, do you take the evidence on oath?
Only as a last resort.
Can you go to a civil servant and say, hold this Bible in your right, or whatever in your right hand, and take an oath?
I can do that.
Have you done it yet?
No. I've tried in one case with the Attorney General's Department, and they claimed jurisdictional objections, and I'm still working on that one.
They are difficult, aren't they?
I get that feeling.
A call from Duncan. Go ahead. Will you speak into camera number 2, please, Carol, when you get calls? Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to speak with Mr. Friedman.
He's here. Just go straight ahead.
Yes, I applied to the Ombudsman in Victoria in person almost a year ago with a case. And I tried to follow this up in several cases. And one time I phoned and they told me, well, the gentleman that is handling it has moved to Vancouver. It's been placed in another man's hands, and twice I've been in contact with this chap. He is now trying to lump a whole pile of cases together against one minister.
What kind of case was it, please?
He has not. How long does the case take to go through?
Well, he told me that. Depends. But what kind of complaint is it? What kind of complaint?
It's regarding a repayment on a tax problem.
With the Ministry of Finance?
Yes.
And it's how long? When did you put the complaint in writing?
I went into the office and applied.
And did the man record the complaint?
Yes, it was taken down. A statement was taken at that time. That's almost a year ago.
I don't know about this particular complaint.
Are you surprised?
No, I'm not, because we still have some complaints that are not resolved that we have received right in the first month, the first 2 months. As I think I suggested, we received such a flood of complaints.
Should he write to you now and refresh everybody's memory?
Well, he should certainly write to me and say if he has not been informed, because normally the investigators keep the complainants informed about the progress on the file.
Your man has not kept you informed?
He has not. I've been waiting for...
Okay, Ombudsman address.
I have it.
Just a minute, with other people don't.
Yes, they can always write to 8 Bastion Square in Victoria, or 1275 West 6th Avenue in Vancouver.
Well, you're not in the courthouse.
No, we've moved out.
Why?
We're too close to the bureaucracy.
A very good reason. Is your space empty in that vast mausoleum?
I believe it's now been taken over by some other government agency.
Ombudsman, 1275 West 6th. Thank you very much. Mark it complaint on the envelope. That'd be a good way, wouldn't it?
Definitely, yes.
Could all be kept together. Go ahead to Karl Friedmann.
Morning, Jack. Mr. Friedman, I'd like to know if you have anything to do with the motor vehicle branch, and if so, do you have anything to do with the point system? Because I was charged with more points than I actually received.
Yes, that's definitely something that we routinely investigate. I'd have to know the details about it to tell you whether there's any substance to the complaint, of course. We go over immediately to the motor vehicles branch. We've set up procedures with them to review them relatively quickly. So
How often do the points come off? Once a year? 3 points?
I believe after you have accumulated a certain amount of points, you have to pay a penalty, and then some of them come off.
Have you complained yet?
I haven't yet, and I was just wondering who I might contact rather than
Have you
waiting.
tried the motor vehicle branch? Where is he?
Pardon me?
Have you tried going to the motor vehicle branch?
No, I'm about to do that. Geez.
Thank you. Wouldn't you think the first thing that people must do, if they're compos mentis, bearing in mind that not everybody is compos mentis, and I'm quite serious about that, is to go to the department itself.
I would hope so, and I'd hope that people do more of that in the future.
Otherwise you get absolutely swamped.
Yes, we sometimes have to tell people, I'm sorry, we can't look at this, please go back, and you've never checked with the agency.
More calls to the Ombudsman after the break. Do your powers, Dr. Friedman, Ombudsman, do they cover civic government?
Not yet. It's listed again in that schedule of future jurisdictions.
At the moment, all you've got is provincial ministries and crown corporations in effect.
Boards, tribunals, you know, BC Hydro, Ferries Corporation, ICBC, you
Ferries
name it.
Corporation, not
Yes.
about bad service.
Why not?
Oh? BC Hydro about my overcharge on my bill?
Yes, we've looked at those.
BC Hydros, Ferry Corporations, Compensation Board, not BRIC. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster. It's the question that I have for Dr. Friedman is whether he is provincially appointed. Does he handle federal complaints? Can I complain about the federal government to the ombudsman?
No, I'm afraid you have to go straight to your MP. Being a provincial official appointed by the provincial parliament or legislature, I cannot touch federal
The
complaints.
answer is no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm a gain recipient, and I have been since November the 1st of last year. Now, I became eligible for BC housing. Now, I have never as yet got anything, but in April, the Human Resources suggested to me that I be evicted from my apartment, and that would give me a priority with the BC housing. I did that. All I got from BC Housing was that my accommodation is adequate. Now, I paid $212.
Just a minute. You're telling me a social worker said to you, get yourself evicted,
Right.
and we'll get you, and you can get into BC Housing.
Right, but that
What device did you use to get yourself evicted?
I just didn't pay the rent.
Well, I've never heard that one before. I must say I should look at that. Definitely both Human Resources and BC Housing are under my jurisdiction, so I can look at the complaint certainly.
How old are you?
56, and I'm unable to work.
Much you paying for your apartment?
$212 a month, and November the 1st it goes up to $233.
Are you on a handicapped allowance?
Yes, sir.
Well, it would seem that some social worker really dropped you in the glue.
Yeah, they sure did.
Have you yet been evicted?
No.
When are you getting out?
Well, I'm not, because I spoke to the landlord, and I'm staying here until I can get a place.
Well, that's interesting if social worker would say, hey, get yourself evicted, don't pay the rent, and that'll make BC Housing find you a place. Now, maybe the person, if it's true, which I don't believe, I don't disbelieve the guy, maybe he was being practical and cutting corners, but was fooled.
I would be a bit surprised if this was the advice, because most social workers know that BC Housing has a long waiting list, and they have certain criteria, you know, of how they...
Put your complaint in writing to the Ombudsman. 12, what was the address?
1275 West 6th Avenue.
If they come round, can they come in and see somebody?
They can come in. We have that office in, I don't know if you know, the old Sigurdsson building that's just been rebuilt.
Do your people work flex time, or do they do a full shift?
They do work flex time, but I would say that people should try to come before 5 o'clock.
But after when, 9?
Well, most of the people in my office work overtime, and you'll usually find someone until 9 or 10 in the evening there anyways, but they stay there because that's the quiet hours of the day where they can write letters and get on with the investigation. So I don't want to say that people are available
But what
after
time
5.
does your office open, 9 o'clock?
It opens at 8:30.
8:30. Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Garrett.
Just a second. Took the wrong one. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Dr. Friedman, you have a very nice job and all, but I don't know if you've got the teeth to do anything about this policy I've discovered with the Workers' Compensation Board. They presently have a sort of a reverse discrimination policy stemming from some old chauvinist attitudes, where they'll give a pension to the widow of a fatally injured worker, whether or not she is dependent. I mean, she can have her own income or whatever. But if the reverse happens, if the widower is not disabled or dependent upon her, then he's not eligible for the pension or for the capital payment. And I'm wondering if you can make a...
You're saying that if a woman pensioner dies, her husband, regardless of his circumstances, should get the allowance?
Well, that's the practice with the widow, but it's not the practice with the widower. I'm saying that, what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Well, I think that's a very interesting question. I haven't had that particular complaint yet. I could look at it, so could incidentally the Human Rights Branch, so you could either go to them or write to me. I can look at particular regulations and practices and see if they are improperly discriminatory. Obviously, I'd have to find that it is improper, but if, as the case is, as you suggest, it sounds to me like it is improper.
Well, it may be improper, but it creates this whole harushma, good word, of phony equality.
Well,
if the man is well established and well set and has a good job and the family assets, why the hell should he get a pension for his widow? I mean, in all equity, honesty, and in the sake of the taxpayer.
Most of the time when you get a pension...
I'm the old chauvinist here.
Yeah, under workers' compensation, if you get a pension, it is usually, I have yet to find a workers' compensation claimant who had money. They all they have basically is their job.
But
and if they lose their ability to earn...
Yeah, but he's talking about allowances and whatnot when the wife has a pension, because most people work. Now he's saying, oh, well, if the widow gets this and that, the widower should also get this and that. Common sense goes out the window, doesn't it, when we come to equality?
Maybe it does, but it may simply be a question of getting used to it.
You may well be right.
You have sex stereotypes in roles, and the man is supposed to go out and work.
I happen to believe, just as an aside, that Dick and Jane is a good thing because it establishes sex roles, and it means we don't have so many gays later on. Little kids are brought up at the moment, they don't know what the hell they are. There's more truth in that than you would think, I'll tell you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Friedman. I was wondering, how long after an incident has arisen does a person still have time to get a hold of you and something going on it?
There is a provision in the Ombudsman Act that says I may refuse to investigate your complaint if you know about it for more than 1 year and haven't complained, or you haven't done anything about it. I may. In fact, I have rarely done it unless I came to the conclusion that you're really not interested in that complaint. But the fact that you did complain to the Ombudsman in this instance would mean that you've shown your interest in pursuing the complaint, and I will at least take an initial look at it, see if there's any merit to it.
Okay, what's your complaint about?
Oh, I went to unemployment and asked them about relocating.
No, that's federal, U.I.C., no validity with Dr. Friedman.
That wasn't the complaint itself, but I was just wondering, like, how long after...
No, different thing. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I was wondering if they handle central mortgage and housing.
That's a federal agency.
Thank you, ma'am. We don't. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was just wondering if it's possible to talk to Karl Friedmann.
Well, surely to goodness, if you're watching the television, you know that. Hold on a second. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I made an application to the Provincial Department of the Registrar of Companies to register a name. And they sent me a letter back saying that that the Attorney General's Department would frown upon the name, therefore they refused me that name. Now, who would I appeal to?
I'm not sure whether you have an appeal to the courts on this one, but certainly the Registrar of Companies has the right to refuse. If you use, for example, let's say an arbitrary example, you take an obscene word and want to use that as your company name, they probably have the right to refuse that. I can investigate the actions of the Registrar of Companies so that if you have that complaint, just let me know about it and I can have a look at it.
Mind you, you've got to watch you don't overdo your powers. I mean, you can become a second guesser on every two-bit decision made by every two-bit bureaucrat in the country.
Well, I look at the procedures and the information that a decision maker has, and I ask, have you taken all information into account? Have you taken relevant information into account, or have you taken any irrelevant information?
You see the point I'm making.
I know.
I mean, an administrative body makes, they're not all stupid decisions.
No, I'm not second-guessing administration. I have to watch that very carefully. But I can
But I mean, if he comes and he wants to call, will you say, a filthy word, why bother? If he uses a filthy word and you see it and say, oh, that's just stupid. Wouldn't you back up the administration regardless? Or would you have to go through all the panoply and rigmarole of being a professional bureaucrat, saying, oh, first of all, you must do this, 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 knowing full well that it's a stupid complaint? I'm not saying his complaint.
Okay, let me take, again, an arbitrary example. Let's say the person who has made that decision that you can't use that name, he wanted to form his own company and he wanted to use that name.
How could you find that out?
I'll ask him.
And he'll lie to you?
If I have suspicion, I'll put him
I
under
don't mean
oath.
that, Registrar of Companies, please. I don't mean that. I'm just saying that I hope you're not chasing wills of the wisp with your enhanced staff and we're getting down to the real nitty-gritty injustices in our bureaucratic nightmare in which we live.
Well, let me put it this way. If you have a complaint, you think it's very important to you. And my job is, at least initially, to take your complaint seriously until I decide that there's no substance to it.
What I'm afraid of is if you take your job too seriously, you'll finish up with 5,000 people, I'm exaggerating, of course, second-guessing sensible decisions.
Well, if they're sensible, I won't second-guess them and I won't criticize the actions.
No, but you'll still spend a lot of time telling them what their appeal procedures are.
Yes.
It's a question of judgment. You want a break? Well, just tell me. Don't make funny faces. After this break, please. From Kelowna to Karl Friedmann. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Dr. Friedman, I noticed that the Ombudsman Act had 11 authorities listed in its schedule, and only the first 2 have been proclaimed as yet. Do you have any hope that some of these other authorities will be responsible to you in the near future?
As you know, that decision is up to the provincial cabinet, okay? It's called proclamation. It's done by the cabinet. And I believe if anyone feels strongly about it, they can write to the Premier, they can write to the MLA about it. I don't want to express an opinion on how fast it should be done. I have no indication at the moment when it will be done. This is in the political process as opposed to the Ombudsman process.
What they're looking at you now, of course, is how many people you've hired, how many extra you're getting, and think, name of goodness, the guy will need a $4 million budget.
Well, that's the problem. I don't mind at the moment that these other things are not yet enforced because it'll give me a chance to increase the efficiency of my office.
How much do your investigators get paid?
We have complaints analysts who get paid somewhere between 15 and 18,000. We have investigators who get paid between 17 and 24,000, I believe.
And they're all provincial government civil servants?
They are hired under the Public Service Act, but only let me see, 2 or 3, I believe, have been in the public service beforehand.
If I could ask about one particular authority. The hospitals and boards of management of hospitals are listed on the schedule, but this hasn't been proclaimed yet.
No.
If this were proclaimed, I wonder what effect that would have on hospital boards who perhaps refuse to appoint abortion review committees.
If the Criminal Code of Canada is being ignored because some people have taken over the hospital board, can you step in on the behalf of a woman? Because after all, it is a provincial field of authority, even though it's a federal law.
I think I could look at whether the decision has been made properly, okay? But I couldn't substitute my view for that of the hospital board.
I understand that, but you couldn't even do that until the 10th authority has been proclaimed by the provincial...
Correct, ma'am.
That's correct.
And that hasn't been proclaimed yet. I think that was for. Yeah. Hello?
Hello, Mr. Friedman.
Yes.
Yeah, it's ICBC. I don't know if you're involved in too many complaints about them, are you?
Well, we have a fair amount of complaints about them.
I must withdraw my remark about Murray Rogan. Murray Rogan does a very good job, but he's the man to complain to.
The procedure of them is to drag out the claims and drag them out so that the person seems to take any settlement they offer them in the, months after the claim seems to have happened.
Well, if there is such a general complaint, let's say that ICBC uses unacceptable methods or standards in settling claims.
Yes, they sure do.
That's something I would like to look at,
Well, it seems every accident that...
well, they're going to be on strike soon anyway. You won't be bothered about that just now. But I don't see how you can take these generalized complaints about authorities.
Why not?
Because you'll finish up with too big a staff and forget the important parts of your office, the actual injustice to individuals whose freedom may be threatened. Got to finish. My thanks to Dr. Karl Friedmann, Ombudsman. You know where to get hold of him? 1265?
1275 West 6th Avenue.
1275 West 6th Avenue.
Tomorrow, some more talk about the Constitution.
Oh, the thing out of Trudeau. And other things, not just the Constitution. At 9 a.m. precisely.